Out in the woods, the young maid's spirits soared, for with cloud-crested oceans of blue sky above, the green foliage alight with golden sun, and the birds flitting from branch to branch, trilling the late morning news, all seemed to wear a far more festive air. Rising on tiptoe and peering up over the heads of the trees, Salome could just make out the rooftops of the abbey, a faint russet-colored fringe, wreathed all around with gray mist clouds. Marianne came to stand beside her. Against the greenery, the pretty squirrel maid looked for all the world like a flower in her blue daffodil-speckled frock. As she twined paws with Salome, she followed the ferret maid's gaze. After a moment she remarked, soft-voiced,
God's name, I don't believe I've ever seen anything prettier.
Muryet wandered over and took Marianne's other paw. Although she was the oldest of all three, she was not much taller than Salome was, and she was so frail of figure that standing beside Marianne, she looked almost childlike.
Why, I've never seen anything more beautiful either. Why, this reminds me of the day when Martin came to Mossflower.
Salome removed her eyes from the scenery long enough to say,
Martin? You mean the mouse on the tapestry what the abbess was telling yarns about? The one who was supposed to have had a sword made from a star?
Muryet immediately plunged into her own colorful description of the day of Martin's arrival.
Oh, it was a summer day, I believe. The brightest summer day the Mossflower has ever seen, in fact. The sun was as golden as a pan of melted butter, dripping its lovely rays all over the treetops, which were as lush and green as fresh broccoli. The clouds floated through the blue sky as fluffy and white as little meadow cream cakes. More cream than cake, of course, which makes them sound delicious and repulsive at the same time. Dear me, I've grown rather hungry.
The other two young maids burst into laughter. Samuel appeared, the picnic basket tucked beneath one arm, the chopping axe slung over his shoulder.
If you're hungry, come and take this basket. I'm past tired of carrying it. Sit and eat while I hunt for a good tree.
Muryet hurried over to Samuel, but Salome and Marianne lingered for a while, watching. Samuel laid his axe across the wagon that had been brought along for carrying fuel, and opened the basket.
The fryer packed turnovers with vegetables and gravy inside, Miss Muryet.
They heard him saying,
But if you don't care for yours, some beasts will be glad to eat it.
Thank you, Master Samuel. I'll just have this fruit and cheese.
Samuel gave her the sort of smile that he gave to Abbey babes who pestered him, and went off, eating his pastry. Muryet sat down before the basket. Salome turned to Marianne.
You think Samuel could be right? About Muryet, I mean.
Marianne looked doubtful.
I haven't a clue. He may be right. But it's a very hard way to think about poor Muryet. And anyhow, if I went poking about and did something foolish, the friar would have my hide. Let's go and eat something.
They sat with Muryet, who had polished off her portion of fruit and cheese. She was far from being full, but she said nothing to her companions. Salome considered the vegetable turnovers. A turnover wasn't quite like bread or scones, was it? Of course it was not. Muryet had to be mad, depriving herself of a wonderful woodlander-made turnover, only because she was afraid of getting drunk off bread. Salome hesitated, a turnover in one paw. Samuel had warned her to keep her snout out of these woodlanders' business, but it couldn't do any harm to tempt Muryet a bit. Besides, she had never seen a woodlander getting drunk. A squirrel made drunk off of turnovers, what a sight that would be, if it happened. Stifling her laughter, Salome glanced at Marianne, who was singing a hymn and paying no mind to the other two. Salome bit into her turnover, making noises of exaggerated relish.
This gravy's the best. What are these vegetables called, Muryet? Never had 'em before. Oh, you wouldn't know, you don't eat these. Carrots and onions.
Muryet swallowed, but otherwise pretended to be deaf. Salome took another bite.
Hope the friar teaches me to make crusts like this. Fluffy and golden. I could eat an abbey full of these.
You could eat an abbey full of anything, you seven-faced ferret.
Marianne turned around giggling, just in time to see Muryet reach for the heap of turnovers. Her brown eyes widened. But it was too late. Muryet was devouring her turnover. Salome squirmed a bit, avoiding Marianne's eyes.
I found a big old dead oak.
Samuel came into view, brushing bits of dirt and bark from his paws.
I'm hungry as the devil. Toss me another turnover, Salome, if you ain't wolfed it down already.
Wordlessly, Marianne gestured towards Muryet, who had wolfed down half of the turnover. The rest was lying neglected, on a checkered handkerchief. Samuel bent over the squirrel maid and took her chin into his paw, peering into her face.
What's ailing you now, Miss Muryet?
Muryet drew away.
I don't feel well.
Her voice sounded flat.
I'm going to lie down. Leave me in peace, will you?
Salome bit her lip, and Marianne appeared worried, but they did not dare to ask questions or make remarks. In silence, they followed Samuel, leaving Muryet lying in that clearing, the folded picnic quilt cushioning her head. Samuel led them over to a great fallen oak. The recent rainstorms had battered away at its coat of bark, but the wood seemed to be intact. Salome stepped forward for a closer look.
Look, there's lots of branches that have been snapped apart. Or chopped apart, more like. The abbey beasts must have found this tree before and gotten fuel from it.
Marianne took a look and dismissed the idea.
The abbey beasts use axes, like the one Master Samuel has. Those look like they've been sliced off with a knife of some sort.
Samuel shouldered his axe.
Mighty clever creature that would have to be. Must have snapped a dozen knives that way. Stand out the way, you two.
Forgetting about Muryet, Salome gave her most ingratiating smile.
You're bound to lose that dagger if you carry it around while you're chopping. Come on, big brother, let me hold it.
Samuel made a face. He surrendered the dagger to her.
Here, you can hold it for a bit, but call me big brother once more and I'll run you through with the thing.
Salome ran her paw along the edge of the blade, which had become in her fancies the sword of Martin. True, the poor Mother Abbess was most likely becoming senile at an early age, but there could be no harm in imagining that she had been speaking the truth about a warrior and a star sword. The Badger King was approaching now. Bear the Fighter, he was called, if she remembered correctly. Well, he certainly did look as huge and fierce as a bear, but there was nothing ungainly about his swordplay. How big he was, yet how agile and dangerously graceful. She couldn't name any of his moves. Perhaps that was because of the fact that those moves were all sorts of fancy thrusts and flourishes, Salome's own idea of swordplay. And as she lifted her sword, Salome was surprised to find, although she was an amateur, she followed every move without effort. At last, Bear the Fighter rose and awarded her with one of his rare smiles. Salome was certain that stern, silent Badger Kings were seldom seen smiling.
You have done well, little lady.
He rumbled, using the same polished, ridiculously proper prose that the Abbess and Sister Jane spoke with.
Take this blade to Mossflower and place it in the paws of Martin the warrior, who will defend the good creatures from the evils of Coulter's shadow.
Whatever that was, but it had been in Marianne's song. Bear the Fighter's eyes were very sad.
I have grown old, little maid. Soon there will be no beast left to rule my mountain, for my only heir, Sunface.
That was the name, wasn't it?
Well, something has happened to him. I forget what exactly, but whatever it was, he's gone now. I leave you to bring Martin here so that he may guard Salamandastra. Soon I will be crossing through the gates of Dark Forest.
Of a sudden, the plaintive on my deathbed look vanished from Bear's eyes, replaced by a scowl.
What in all Mossfire are you bawling for, Salome?
Salome blinked in startlement, and realized that her eyelids were wet. Samuel had set the axe aside and was staring at her. Salome sniffled and managed to smile. If only Samuel could have seen poor Bear the fighter, preparing to draw his last breath.
Just thinking about Papa. He was a nice old sort, better than most at least. It was him what gave you the blade. Wasn't it?
Samuel, evidently relieved that Salome had managed to pull herself together, continued with his chopping.
Aye, when you were not but a kid.
Marianne placed a gentle paw upon that of Salome.
Well, I'm certain creatures don't go up to heaven just to have you spend all your days weeping and moaning about them. They're up there waiting for us, sitting in thrones, with cups of silver and gold and good deeds piled up about them. Just waiting for us to come up and join them when we grow tired of this old world.
The squirrel maid's brown eyes followed the acrobatics of a summer giddy golden-winged butterfly.
But the knights of heaven, well, the ordinary creatures of heaven see them in their palaces, like I'm looking at that butterfly.
Later, Samuel paused with his work and went to check up on Muryet. He carried the axe with him. Salome knew that he would not set it down for fear that he would ache twice as badly when he resumed his chopping. Samuel was away for so long that Salome began to think that he had decided to rest after all. Marianne had fallen asleep, reclining against a tree stump. Salome decided that she might as well practice her Martin the Warrior swordplay with Samuel's dagger, seeing as he wasn't around to forbid her. First, she gave it a thorough polishing, spitting on the blade, then rubbing it with a leaf till it shone as bright as a mirror. Having done this, she rose and gave the dagger a few elegant twirls before throwing it. Instead of hissing through the air like a javelin, as she hoped it would, it hurtled across the clearing, spinning wildly, and lost itself amidst the foliage. Hurrying over to the spot, Salome went down on all fours and began to paw through the grass and heaps of fallen leaves. The blade was nowhere in sight.
Oh, hellgates!
Salome returned to the clearing and sat down, trying to convince herself that if Samuel did not strangle her to death, first he would search for the dagger himself. Aye, perhaps the dagger was in plain sight. Samuel's eyes were much better than hers. It was not pleasant to think of what he would have to say to her about being a silly, careless little oaf. But, so long as the dagger was found, it would not be much worse. With these thoughts, Salome managed to fall asleep.
Salome! Marianne! Salome! Wake up! Get up, for God's sake!
The two young maids opened their eyes and saw Samuel standing there, clutching the limp, motionless bundle that was Muryet. Those gaunt limbs dangled uselessly, almost skimming the ground. Blood had drenched her abbot, and upon the front of Samuel's tunic, reddish-black stains were spreading themselves. Samuel cast a desperate look in the direction of the wagon, but was forced to discard that idea.
Don't stand there like oafs, you two.
He gritted.
Get walking, fast, back to the abbey in the same way we came, and try not to make a sound.